Hello and welcome to Contra Mundum. I'm your host, Pastor Andrew Isker, and with me is my co-host, CJ Engel. Good morning, CJ. GM, how are you? What's going on? What's new?
I'm doing good. I was telling you before we went on that I've just had a release of a burden that's been with me for several years, and it's zapped a lot of my intellectual creativity, and it's just been a really difficult struggle for myself, particularly in my family at large. And I'm really happy that it seems like it's over now, and I'm for the first time. It's like weird. It's like walking in a new suit, like a new skin suit. I am a new person, and it just feels great. So I'm energetic, I'm alive, and I don't have this like thing sitting on my head. So I'm really just happy I can actually legitimately say I am happy right now. So it's been a long road.
That's great. I'm glad you were able to get back from Ukraine after dealing with that, and from our last episode, and now that you were filled with a vital spirit and full of energy, now everyone that's like, CJ needs to say more stuff. Everyone, that's always the critique, which I agree with. Is we need more CJ, more CJ. Well,
I need camera help too.
Yeah, now CJ has been unleashed. Now it's going to be all CJ all the time here. I'm just gonna sit in the corner.
Yeah.
No, we've got quite a few things to talk about this morning. We've always got stuff to talk about. We could always talk about anything. But there's a few things that have been unfolding over the last couple of weeks. One of them just happened. We're recording here on a Thursday. This happened this last Wednesday. Was a man in Utah, an older man of the boomer generation, had been posting threats and violent rhetoric online, and the FBI sent a SWAT team and shot him, killed him. And so I mean the type of stuff we could maybe link to it, maybe we don't want to. The things, I mean, it was just really, really violent stuff about Biden and Democrats and the FBI itself, and basically baiting them to do something like this. And it's really tragic because this man apparently has a mentally disabled son that he was the sole provider and caretaker for, and now that child is without anyone in the world to care for him. So extremely, extremely sad story. But I don't know how much you followed that, CJ, but I mean, what do you think about this in general, this phenomenon? Because I think this kind of stuff is going to continue to happen. Like, people are very angry.
Mm-hmm.
People see the things that are occurring in our country, and they have no real outlet for it other than going on Facebook and saying really crazy stuff.
I think this kind of stuff is just inevitable. First of all, don't do what this guy did. You have to recognize that if you're going to think of the regime as your enemy, which they are, you have to properly calculate what they're willing to do to shut you up. So there's no benefit in behaving like this, because they do want to see you eliminated. And this is the thing that you have to understand is, yes, you're angry. I think these kind of things are going to be inevitable, especially as economic difficulty begins to face us, especially people of that generation, and they're desperate. And I understand that. Like, these are people that I'm sympathetic to. The regime is our world historical enemy at the moment, and they are set on destroying our way of life and everything that is near and dear to our hearts. And I think that these types of situations are going to become more common. But I guess I would also use this, because people listening to this are probably younger, and I would just advise being there for those family members who are older and frustrated. I see it in my dad's generation. I have uncles and grandfathers, and they are legitimately angry. Everything that they were promised their entire life about the meaning of being an American, about the meaning of being a citizen here in America, about being part of the United States government, is all been proven a lie, and their own government hates them and wants to see them dead. And they don't really have outlets. They don't really know how to express this anger and this frustration. They have no way of channeling this energy. And this is a temptation for a lot of people. And I think there's other people that we haven't heard about that are probably doing even more crazy things because they're so desperate and they don't know how to articulate that. That's what Trump was. Trump was a channel.
Yeah.
He was a sponge that could absorb all of that energy and frustration. And the more that they mock and tease the American people via mechanisms like Donald Trump, the more you're going to see stuff like this. So it's not surprising. I think it's on the beginning stages of something that's going to become more systematic. But yeah, don't be stupid online because they are watching and they will retaliate.
Yeah. And I think, some of it is, the phenomenon, like you said, this generation, they get ragged on a lot by our generation. I do it because you want to have genuine critiques generationally, like of different perspectives of what they of how this group of people think and believe differently than we do, and the things that formed them culturally and so forth. But it's not as though that generation is not praiseworthy in many respects as well. Like these men, all the men of that generation that I know worked extremely hard their entire lives. The boomer saying the millennial or the zoomer or whatever doesn't have good work ethic is true. Like they're telling the truth because they worked really, really hard. They worked really hard to get to the point where they could retire and enjoy their lives. And many of them, and I think this plays in part of it, many of them, right, they retire, especially a lot of them retired around 2020 when the lockdowns and everything happened. Some of them retired early. They're like, it's close to retirement. I'm just about where I need to be. And as soon as they cross the threshold that their wealth advisor or whatever told them, okay, you're ready to retire, they retired. Some of them maybe a little early. And now the economy has gone down, and many of them, their standard of living isn't what they thought it was going to be. And the economy is going to continue to tumble, and the returns they're going to get on their investments and things like this are not going to be as good as they thought. And so their standard of living isn't that good compared to what they thought it would be. And then they see all of the political things happening. So they're very angry. And rightfully so. They work their whole lives to be able to enjoy their life. And the problem though is, like many, whether the boomers are angry, like this guy was, or the boomers are just still within the system, they believe in an America that no longer exists.
Right.
Like this guy, I'm sure thought, I have freedom of speech. I have all this, and so many of men of this generation think of like radical revolutionary political change that, well, if it gets bad enough, I've heard them say this, if it gets bad enough, we still have all the guns. And this guy was posting pictures of him in a ghillie suit and posting pictures of all his AR-15s and things like that, which is just like, neon sign to the FBI or ATF or whatever federal agencies that this guy's a threat. And so like they think this, they think that we could fight a second American Revolution and we could just have a civil war and things like this. And they post these violent things, these violent fantasies, not realizing that even if you wanted to do that, that world does not exist. You don't have those capabilities. Like this guy was alone. He didn't have, some group of friends ready there to defend him.
Yeah. The other thing is, like, if you look at the articles, like, his neighbor said he was just a nice, friendly guy, and he was just, frustrated and didn't know how to express himself except for online. And then you find out that, like, when they showed up to, to talk to him the first time, he was basically, saying that he knew his rights and they should come back with a warrant. And people just need to understand all those rights, all those, hedges of protection that the law is supposed to afford you. They don't exist. They exist for your enemies. I'm sure you saw the headline about in Portland, all the Antifa stuff. They're just completely getting off scot-free. But those rights belong to your enemies now, and they don't belong to you at all. And you can't depend on them. You can't rest on them to express your rights as an American citizen to critique your government. That's the past.
We should talk about Portland a little bit. Because I don't know how many people are familiar with. Some people are, but Andy, is it No? I don't know how to pronounce his name. I don't know Vietnamese that well. But he he was doxxed and attacked by Antifa in Portland, viciously. Like, I think he had to go to the hospital, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
And all of his attackers, all the people that organized it, all the people involved in this, were criminally charged, and they walked away scot-free, every single one of them. And the judge, did nothing. I mean, the whole legal system in Portland is stacked against us, stacked against our people, and nothing is going to fix that or change that. I mean, it's the kind of thing where it's like, I mean, we went on Joel Webbin's show. We saw, all the people freaking out this summer about Joel Webbin's book about leaving, fleeing blue areas and things like that, which, especially for, like, we live in blue states, but red parts of blue states. So we're fairly secure. But if I was in Minneapolis, or if you were in San Francisco, we would be getting out of those places. And so it's still, his critique, I think, is still very valid. And so our people simply cannot exist in Portland or places like it, because it's pure anarcho tyranny. Like, people need to understand this, that the law does not protect us at all.
Was it who? I don't know who it was, but like, everyone obviously gets mad at people who reference anarcho tyranny because the phrase was coined by Sam Francis at Chronicles and it's racist or whatever. But literally, we're seeing it play out before our very eyes. We're seeing the people who cause public mayhem and destruction and are literally anarchic subversives. They're the ones that are being subsidized by the legal system. They're the ones that are everyone turns their heads away from them, and they're allowed to run roughshod over the communities in order to get their political revolution accomplished. Meanwhile, law-abiding citizens and people that have done no damage, they're the ones that get cracked down upon. And so you can see that, and it's going to become more of a theme. And I can't believe that Sam Francis anticipated this by 25 years, because it was just baked into the cake for him. And all those things that he saw, all the legal changes and all the administrative changes that were taking place, 3 decades ago, are now coming to fruition. And if you don't see it within the next 5 years, you're never going to see it. And I don't know what to say to you, but it's going to become clear as day, explicit, the South Africanization of America. There are rights that belong to some favored political groups, and there are rights that are specifically denied because of your demographic participation in society. And it's going to be shocking.
Oh yeah, you see this. I mean, you only have to be online for a little bit of time, and I tell people not to dwell on these things or post them very often or share them. I mean, it's easy to want to do that, but like, just the videos of crime in these cities by one particular group that is allowed to do crime because of their racial and ethnic background, that I think this stuff is allowed on the internet because, and not just totally permanently banned, because it's demoralizing. They want us to be demoralized. But you see it, and you know that these things are happening. I mean, here in Minnesota, Minneapolis, Hennepin County is really the very, very worst, where you have this prosecutor, Mary Moriarty, who was a defense attorney, a criminal defense attorney for all, and this like ideologue, this advocate of criminal justice reform, where it just means making crime legal. And she realized, why am I doing this when I could just go be a prosecutor and then just hand down slaps on the wrist? So I mean, you have people that are charged with murder that get probation. There was a story. I mean, one of the latest outrages here is that a Somali raped and brutally beat a homeless woman, and was 5 or 6 years ago, was finally caught using DNA, and he got a couple months probation for it. And it's like, this is a crime that, I mean, incredibly heinous crime this guy did. A couple months probation. There was the really outrageous one, also a Somali in Rochester, Minnesota, where he was raping children, and he got, I think, 18 months in prison. And here, we just had this week, Tao Tho, who was one of the officers on the scene of the George Floyd incident, and he was just doing crowd control, right? Yeah. That's all he did there, and he just got sentenced to like 5 years in prison. And if you haven't seen the video, I shared it, the video of him at his sentencing. The entire time he became a Christian while undergoing this prosecution. Like he had a genuine conversion, and the entire time he spent half an hour preaching the gospel to everybody listening. And I mean, and he talked about, you know, the Pharisees and the leaders of Israel doing, you know, committing this great injustice against Jesus. And I mean, you could tell that he's, you know, obliquely showing that same kangaroo court thing is being done to him.
Yeah.
That he didn't do anything wrong, and he never admitted guilt through the entire time, and rightfully so. He didn't do anything wrong, and now he's going to prison for 5 years. Meanwhile, literal rapists and violent criminals get probation, while this guy is standing there while George Floyd is overdosing, and he goes to prison for 5 years. It is in total insanity. And so, yeah, you have these people like people that criticize us, like Jake Meador and Blake Callens, who like, oh, they're watching this now. How do you like my beautiful Minneapolis background, Blake? They say, oh, they mentioned Sam Francis. They mentioned it. It's like, yeah, he was right.
Yeah,
he was right about all of this. He's absolutely right. We are what you don't have anything to say about a narco tyranny happening in our country. You're more worried about Emmett Till, right? 60 years ago,
right?
When this stuff happens. I mean, you have totally racial based murders of white children by black people, right? You have the most heinous one, Cannon Hinnant, where his black neighbor just walked up and shot him point blank in the head because he's a white kid. You have here in the Twin Cities, you have an insane black guy who threw a child off of the third story of the Mall of America. Right? You have stuff like that happen, and it's like, that doesn't register at all. That doesn't really matter. Oh, no. Like, these guys have been told their entire lives that white people are evil, white people are evil, white people are evil, using Emmett Till and things like that. And then they commit these crimes that are racially based against white people. And it's like, well, that's it's just that's a local crime story. It's not really a big deal. It doesn't have any overarching meta narrative or anything like that. No, it's insane. It's insane, the things that are going on. And if you can't admit it, if you can't see that this is the stuff that is occurring in our country, then you are an enemy, right? You're not just stupid. You're not just not getting it. You are a person that is committed to the evil narrative that is being peddled. And you are our enemy. That's it. That's all it is. So anyway, but all this being said, like, you can't Fed post, and you have to, I mean, because you see, especially boomers who are really angry, and they think that they could say these things, and that's not the right outlet. That's a suicidal outlet if you do that. And you have to, the older men in your life, you have to talk to them and make them understand this.
Exactly.
You cannot do that. You're putting your own life at risk. You're putting other people's lives at risk. This guy in Utah, his child, who is mentally challenged, now has nobody because this guy was selfish and wanted a Fed post.
Yeah, this is one of the things too. Is I know I have my criticism of Rod Dreher and all that, but in his new book,
you have criticisms of Rod Dreher?
Live Not by Lies. That's what it is.
You're telling me now for the first time.
I actually reviewed positively Rod's book in Chronicles. But one of the things that stood out to me is his idea of learning to suffer well, because I know you and I are slightly different on like being white pilled or black pilled or whatever, but regardless of who's right on that, we have a long struggle ahead of us.
Absolutely.
Probably 100+ years. You know what I mean? To rebuild.
Yeah.
So one of the things that he pointed out was just learning to suffer well. And people who are reading this book, who are really understanding what time it is, who can really recognize the writing on the wall, they need to share the ideas of suffering well, because this guy was not prepared for this circumstance. He was frustrated. He didn't know how to handle it. He didn't know how to contain it. And he didn't know how to channel it for some sort of beneficial end. So he resorted to social media posting. But I would say that too is learn yourself. I would look at the writings of lost causes, whether it's traditional Russia or historical conservative Germany or even the old South. Look at how these people have handled situations where they saw and witnessed the loss of their culture.
Yeah, like
because we're about to go through that,
the
and you need
memoirs
to learn to suffer through it.
of Baron Wrangel, the leader of the White Army in the Russian Civil War. That's a lost cause. They lost.
Yeah.
But I mean, this man was stoic, was firm, was totally in control of himself and his people, and he saved tens or hundreds of thousands of his men from certain death.
Right.
By when they evacuated Crimea.
Yeah.
Right, because he kept his cool, because he understood the time of day, understood the situation, and operated accordingly.
Yes.
Like that's the thing. I mean, and I think some of it too.
And I would say too,
go ahead.
train your son. Like, I've had a good life. Like, anyone born, in the late 80s and 90s, they've had a really leisurely life, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been struggle. I've had my share of struggles for sure, but
In adulthood, it's been difficult for us. But
compared to what's coming politically, like, your sons need to learn now how to struggle, and you need to struggle well before them, because the regime is going to be much more of an enemy to them than they were to you.
Yeah.
And so I would say that, train your sons to suffer well, and continue to speak those things to, boomers in your church and other people who, have a difficulty grasping and coping with what's going on, and don't let them get down these. I bet there's a lot of people in your church that you don't even realize are posting these things.
Yeah.
But they are.
They are. They are. I mean, that's part of it. I mean, and I think, you think about this guy, and I think about it just within the context of the church, within evangelicalism, is there are no churches that have anything for a guy like that.
It's true. Yeah.
Like they have nothing for him.
He has to apologize for his participation in racist culture, and
I mean, he's in Utah, so it's Mormon world or whatever, but there's evangelical churches there. And I don't know if he was a Mormon or not, but like say he's a typical American that is vaguely Christian.
Yeah.
Right. There is, and there's all sorts of guys like this in every community. And you think about the typical evangelical church, he goes there, and if he tells the pastor, hey, there was this election and all the problems with it, and like, look at all the things that are happening, tens of millions of foreign, third world people are invading our country. All this kind of stuff is happening. A narco tyranny everywhere. And this pastor is going to treat him like he is a bad person, right? That's like evangelical pastors have been trained to look at these guys and think, you are bad. You're evil and racist and misogynistic and bigoted and blah, 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 blah. Right. That's the, standard operating procedure of evangelicalism right now in America. So there are no churches where you could incorporate a man like this into a community where he can find some hope in a people that are like him, that see all the problems and have this moderating effect on a man like this. He didn't have that, right? He doesn't have anything like that. And if there's anything, it's getting our churches to operate in this kind of frame, to see that we are, refugees and exiles in our own country. We talked about this before. It's like, in one sense, the church is in exile, right? The church that actually gets what's going on are people without a homeland in our own country. And you need to take people like that and bring them together and give them hope. And it doesn't need to be a false hope that, we're going to win tomorrow. Like, Donald Trump's going to get elected. He's going to fix the deep state and all this kind of stuff. And the Patriots are in control. Like, no, don't peddle stuff like that. But explain that history is long, that there is a struggle in front of us, that your children and your grandchildren and your great grandchildren and descendants of yours that will never know your name are going to continue fighting this struggle long after you're gone. Yeah. And that's where the hope is, that we will continue on, that you look at, Russia in the 20th century, right? The Soviet Union came and went. And throughout it all, there were Christians there that remained. And the same will be true here, right? The globalist American regime is here, and it's been here for a while, and it's going to continue to become powerful. Yet it's not going to be forever, right? It cannot be. It will not be, right? That's that's the hope that you have to have, but you need to be able to suffer and struggle and continue on living through that. And so that's what I try to do with my church, with my people, is provide a community like that where we get what's going on, we get the things that are taking place, but that we have hope, that Jesus Christ reigns at the Father's right hand, and all of these things are not happening outside of his purview, right? He has allowed America to descend into this insanity because we've rejected him. That's as clear as day. And it's not going to stop until we repent.
Mm-hmm.
It's not. And it might be, a small repentance of a small chunk of Christians. And this is where my white pill kind of hope is it could be 10% of evangelicalism repenting of all of these idols that we have that we don't even know that we have, and turning to Christ, and all of a sudden, boom, he gives us a Constantine type figure to lead us, right? That is certainly a possibility. But or it could be, like CJ has said, it could be 100 or 200 years from now. I mean, we don't know how history is going to play out. We don't know what God exactly is doing. But we do know that we have duties to our families, to our people, and to continue to press on and fight on, and to not do stupid things that will only end in death, right? That's not what we should be doing. Yeah. So, I mean, do you have anything to say to that? I mean, what do you think about in terms of in terms of the context of the church? What churches should be doing? Because there are pastors that listen to this as well, and also elders and men that have standing in their churches. Right? What should they be doing? What should they be pushing for? What should they be saying?
Yeah, no, I think one of the things that has stood out to me over the last couple of years is, we spend a lot of time with getting our ideology right, learning about history and learning about where things are and where things are going. But I would also say, pay particular attention to the people in your church who don't know how to cope with what's happening. You have to find those people, and you have to come around them and build those communities. I mean, we talked about, some of the dynamics of politics in other places of the world. We're going to talk about Africa, where there actually is a community of people that can stand together against the globalist American regime. You have to be doing the same thing, because there are people in your church that don't see where it's coming, and they don't know how to cope, and they don't know how to struggle, and they're not prepared intellectually or spiritually to struggle. And I think that's one thing that stood out to me, is just finding those people and making sure that within your congregation, all the weak leaks are recognized and being addressed, because strength, I think, is called for, during the next several decades of transition to wherever this is going. And I don't think you should be so enthusiastic about your buddies online that you forget about the fact that there are people that are going through real difficulties. The people that, like, they didn't have the scales fall off their eyes, they weren't able to take the red pill, and suddenly they realize that because they have a racist opinion, they can't get any of their 401k savings or something like that. Like, how do you deal with people like that? Because they're going to be tempted to despair, and we have to pay attention to things like that too. The physical community is more important than the online community.
Oh, absolutely. And these people exist all around you. And I think, I mean, just even in terms of if you are in a good church where you have a good pastor that understands these things, you have good leadership that understands the time of day, where you should be reaching out locally is to people like this guy, right? Finding them and being a blessing to them, and to keep them from the way of folly, because they exist and they're out there, and the churches that exist largely want nothing to do with anyone like this. They don't want the guy with the Trump flags everywhere. They don't want the guys that think that he's good. And they certainly don't want people that are political really at all. And so that the church largely has nothing to offer these men. And so you need to be the one that does have something to offer them, because they're out there. I mean, all you have to do is be someone involved in your community. You go to I like to go to things at like the American Legion. Like there's lots of events. That's where all like the really patriotic people in my town are.
Mm-hmm.
Different. Go to the 4th of July thing and the Memorial Day thing and the Veterans Day thing and talk to people there, because those are the people that still like believe in America, that still love our country. And many of them are unchurched or not really churched at all. And there's a reason for that, because the church has nothing for them. And you could be that for these people.
Mm-hmm.
You can give them hope and give them a people that can surround them and love them. And so that's I think what has to be done. And incidents like this really show the weakness of the church. I think more than anything else, it shows it shows how low things have gotten, and how much despair there is out there, and it's going to continue to get worse for people like this, and you need to be there for them.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you mentioned Africa. You mentioned Africa, and there's lots of stuff going on in Africa right now. There was a military coup in the country of Niger. And so that's still developing, still happening. So I don't feel prepared to comment too much on the specifics of what's occurred in that country. But I think overall, we had an episode about Uganda and Ted Cruz saying how barbaric the Uganda law is. Just this week, the World Bank told Uganda that they're not going to offer any more loans to Uganda until they change their evil, discriminatory, anti-gay laws. And so it's become clear that Africa is this
What was
target
that?
for the
What was that?
globalist regime.
What was that Sam Hyde meme where it's like state enforced homosexuality?
Yeah, that's one of his first things. He did that TED
Yeah,
talk, just that's mocking TED talk,
it's
and he's like,
but like
state enforced homosexuality.
it's so true.
And it is.
It's
Yeah, it
so
is.
true. It's
Yeah,
crazy. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly. That's 100% what it is. And um, I look at it. It's interesting because Africa is. During the Cold War, Africa and third world countries. This is where the term third world came from. The first world being the West, and the second being the Soviet and their various satellites. And there were this constant conflict over these places. Of course, America was also deeply subversive and leftist and pro-communist, because they're the American CIA and the American State Department are the ones that undid all of the British and French empires and took apart their colonies. That didn't happen like spontaneously. It wasn't like all of these countries decided, hey, we don't want these people ruling over us. Like somebody did that, and that was the CIA. It wasn't even the Soviets. It was like the CIA is trying to get ahead of the Soviets and bring these countries into the American orbit.
Mm-hmm.
But that conflict really is still ongoing, and but it's inverted now. It's backwards, right? The Russians and the Chinese are the countries that are saying you can keep your traditional way of life. We just want to invest in your country. And of course they get resources and things like that. They're not doing it out of the generosity of their own hearts. But you can keep your own country. You can live how you want to. We won't meddle in your country. We just want stuff. Right. And the Americans, they want the stuff, and they're going to meddle in how you live in order to get it. So pick your poison. And they're largely picking the Russian and the Chinese poison. And you could see why. So what does this tell us about the American regime and what it is?
No, this is the way that the American regime has existed since the post-war. This is the thing. Like after European civilization was finally, put to death in World War II, it was basically a contest between two styles of modernity: the American capitalist system and the Soviet communist system, and both of them were just different types of managerialism. That's what like James Burnham would say. And they had to go through and they had to capture the third world, and they had to dominate the world by in order to confront the other world contender for superpower. And what we're seeing now is kind of the unfolding of America's victory in that process. And I agree. And America's chosen the path of cultural subversion, whereas the East is trying to help them uphold their culture in order to, and it's not like it's altruistic or anything like that. Like you said, I mean, they want resources, but they're trying to push back against, an ever expansive NATO American empire. And this is their way of pushing back, is they have to put these, fortresses in the third world, in Africa and, Southeast Asia and places like that. That's what Thailand's all about. It's all about, posturing and
Taiwan.
geographical.
Yeah.
Taiwan. Sorry, what did
Yeah.
I say? Thailand. Yeah.
Thailand
Taiwan.
too, but also
But
Taiwan.
Taiwan, yeah. It's the same thing. It's the same story, and it's about geopolitics, and human rights is sort of the veil over that. So that's what I think. Oh, close the ad.
Uh-oh. Hold on. Oh,
they want us with the ads.
Yeah, they want us to buy Go Squeeze. So here is the Deputy Secretary of State Victoria Newland. Look at her. She is meeting with the military junta in Niger.
She's beached in Niger.
Andrew,
it's called freedom of speech, not freedom to beach.
Yeah. She is in Niger and trying to negotiate with the new rulers of Niger and get them within the orbit of the United States, and they've largely rebuffed her. But Newland, I mean, you have to understand about her.
Yeah, she's the 2014 Ukraine lady.
Yeah. I mean, she's the one that
her MO.
She, like, everything that has happened in Ukraine in the last 2 years was kicked off in 2014 by her.
Yep.
By her. I mean, she's the one that was recorded, right?
This is how the American empire does it. It HR departments its way into the third world. And this is how it expands itself.
Yeah, I mean,
she's there to provide lectures. That's what she does.
I remember, people talking about how I don't even remember who the tweet was by. It was really good, where you comparing, just how foreign policy was done throughout all history, where you go and you send a delegation, it'd be an impressive statesman, a general or something, someone with a tremendous amount of gravitas. And now what America does is it sends people like Hillary Clinton to go to these third world countries in their pantsuit and cackle at them. And it's like Caligula's horse being made a consul, right? It's this parody. I mean, it's done, I think consciously, it's done where it's like you send this HR lady to Niger or to Ukraine and to tell them what for, and they have to submit to her and like bow to this person. And it's to humiliate them, right? That's the point. Like, I mean, who would go into a meeting with this person and treat them like they're some important figure? Like, she doesn't have any gravitas whatsoever.
Yeah.
But that's what happens. And I think she was the one that if I remember correctly, was, there was a leaked phone call that WikiLeaks got a hold of, where she basically outlined the entire American strategy of the then Obama administration in Ukraine, and how they were manipulating the European Union and NATO and everything to bring all of this about. That, like, I mean, so many people, and I think people now are beginning to, they're beginning to see, what is occurring, with Ukraine. Like I've noticed a lot more people, especially, early on, like especially the boomer generation, but not just them, saw Ukraine and like, oh, Putin is Hitler and he's going to try to take over the world. And like, that's the narrative they continue to peddle on like Fox News and things like that. Yeah. And way fewer people are buying it. Right. So they're like, no, wait a second. Joe Biden's son went to Ukraine in 2014 and 15 and thereafter and like cleaned up and gave all, they took in millions or hundreds of millions of dollars from Ukraine and divvied it up with his dad. And what if it's about that? And like they're starting to put two and two together, that it's not this altruistic foreign policy that we have where we're trying to protect the freedom of the brave Ukrainians. It's that we want to put nuclear weapons a few minutes away from Moscow. That's the whole point. That's what they want. They want to. And the second you do that, you have Russia right where you want them. Like their regime would collapse because they would no longer cease to exist as a sovereign state. They would be under they would be under America and under everything that we would want from them. Right? You get Ukraine in NATO, and you put hypersonic nuclear weapons where you have first strike capability. That's the point, right? You have these missiles that can reach Moscow in like 90 seconds or like 2 minutes. And by the time they know they're in the air, it's too late for them to launch a counterstrike. So you have total nuclear superiority over them. I mean, we're getting into like Cold War politics again.
Yep.
Where it's this nuclear politics where, I mean, much of the Cold War, like you have these short range nuclear weapons in Europe, and that caused a tremendous amount of problems and political problems and geopolitical problems there. Because you're constantly jockeying for nuclear advantage. I mean, that's what the Cuban Missile Crisis was over, is that the Russians would have first strike capability, and we wouldn't be able to launch a counterstrike if they have weapons in Cuba. But lo and behold, we had the same weapons in Turkey, which was just as close, or not quite as close, but still within, too close for comfort for the Russians. And that was what ended it, is we took them out. Nobody knows that. Everybody thinks that John F. Kennedy just stood his ground. It was tough. And it's like, no, we negotiated an end to that. And it's the exact same type of thing where nobody has any idea that, like, I mean, if you just look at it from the opposite perspective, if China or Russia were trying to get Mexico or Canada into a military pact with them, where they could put nuclear weapons within minutes of our biggest cities, and we're able to have first strike capability, we would not have a country anymore. Like we would have to do whatever they tell us.
Yeah.
Right. That's what it would mean. And so they cannot allow that to happen. They cannot. That's why this occurred. That's why this war was provoked by the United States, even though it doesn't. I mean, this is what they always do. This is what they've done since World War II.
This has been Ron Paul's thing.
Yeah,
like he's been right about this the entire time.
Yeah. America, what it does is it does these sleights of hand where you maneuver. I mean, this is literally what Henry Stimson wrote in his memoirs. We have to maneuver Japan into make it look like they're firing the first shot. Right? That's what they did in World War II. Is they knew we couldn't launch a war against Japan because the American people wouldn't accept it. But if we get attacked, then we could go to war. And so the whole emphasis of the Roosevelt administration, even though he campaigned on not going into World War II in 1940, that was his whole campaign, was he kept us out of war. And the entire time behind the scenes, they're pushing the Japanese into attacking us. Right? That's what happened. It's the same thing here. Right? They maneuver the Russians to make it look like they're the aggressors and that we're the freedom fighters. And we care about freedom and democracy and all these good things and lullabies and rainbows and unicorns. That's what America is. But reality is that no, these manipulative Satans behind the scenes twist and do all of these things and in order to provoke conflict. Right? That's the whole point. That's the entire point, that they can't abide by a country like Russia existing. I mean, and you look at Russia, the stark contrast, what they're doing legally there, like they're opposing homosexuality, they're opposing these things. And maybe it's propaganda aimed at the West, right? Maybe it is. I don't know. I don't really care. Because in public, that's what they're doing. They're at the very least standing for some kind of morality. Whereas we're pushing, transgenderism on Ukraine. Like I don't know if you saw the Gonzalo Lira stuff where all of these reports from like the propaganda ministry of Ukraine is some, man dressed as a woman in fatigues giving these reports about Lira and his activities and things of that nature. And it's like, that's what the war is. That's what the war is, to put people like that and populate the whole country, make it in the image of America today of 2023. Yeah. That's what they want. That's what our foreign policy is. So in Africa, it's the same thing. There's a post, I think I can't remember who it was by. It was some African figure where he says, we go to the Chinese to get a loan to build a hospital or a school or some infrastructure, and they give us a loan. We go to America and they give us a lecture. And then some idiot American foreign policy clown replies and says, but what are the Chinese getting in exchange for the loan? And the African guy replies, here comes the lecture.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. It's exactly it. What's Victoria Newland doing in Niger? It's time to
Yeah,
lecture.
she's time to lecture. Exactly.
It's
Yep.
time to lecture. And so I mean, you see this, and China has made massive investments in Africa because Africa is full of resources. I mean,
Yeah,
all the
but like I
oil,
like I
uranium, all the stuff you want, that's where
that's
it
all
is.
that's all true. But like I said before, too, like part of it's geostrategic. Part of it's
Oh, of
preventing
course
the
it is.
expansion of America. It's not just
Yeah.
economic; it's
Oh
also
no,
geopolitical.
no.
Yeah,
I mean, they all play together. Is what I'm saying.
for sure.
And America knows if they can culturally subvert all of these African countries, that they have them forever.
Hmm.
Right. That's the
It's true.
point.
Yeah,
The cultural subversion is the point. I mean, it's honestly it's very similar to the strategy of the Soviet
yeah.
Union.
It's Michael Jones. Like sexual liberation is all about political control.
Yeah, it's a means of political control, and it
Yeah.
is. It absolutely is. And so if you have them under the sway of American degeneracy,
Hmm.
then it's extremely difficult because it's what is the culture war and all of that. It's tearing apart millennia of cultural capital that's been built up generation after generation after generation of traditional societies, of the way people have always lived, ripping that all apart. And you can't just put the genie back in the bottle, right, and flip a switch and say we're going to go back to a traditional morality, right? That's not so easy. It takes generations, hundreds of years to build things like that up.
Hmm.
And and if you tear it apart, you can rule these people easily.
Hmm.
That's the goal. That's why they do that.
Yeah.
If you Because Americans are ruled easily. I mean, that's essentially, I keep shilling my book. And last week I said the 50th. Actually, I was wrong. It's the 22nd is the release date. Don't worry, it's not going to get pushed back again. It's not going to happen. But the point of the book is um is recognizing all of these means of control over us, right? Of a consumerist society, a sexually liberated society, all of these things. The point of them is that they put these idols in our society in order to manipulate and control us. And
Hmm.
you have to, in yourself, as an individual and as a group, hate these things. Hate these
Hmm.
things. Swim upstream of what the culture is saying and hate them, abhor them completely. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to do what CJ says, to be able to suffer and struggle and survive through the insanity in the coming decades.
Hmm.
That is absolutely paramount, to learn to despise these idols and chop them down wherever you see them.
Hmm.
And so um, that's what's happening in Africa. And so I'm encouraged that these countries are standing their ground, and that they do have it isn't just America is this unipolar thing anymore. There is resistance globally to the American empire that's growing. It's still smaller countries that don't have huge economies or anything like that. But Russia and China and South Africa, Brazil, all these things. I mean, they're trying to pick them off. They did this in Brazil where they got rid of Bolsonaro.
Hmm.
But that's what is occurring, and the geopolitics of all of it is interesting. And it's not like I'm like, oh yeah, go Russia, go China, go all these countries. Yeah, aren't they great? Because I don't like the People's Republic of China. I don't have any particular love of Russia either. I view them as the enemy of my enemy.
Hmm.
Right. That's how you have to look at it. Like I'm not going to be like, just this week there were a bunch of uh, American sailors who leaked all sorts of classified information to China, and it's like these men, and it's ironic because they have Chinese names and they're culturally totally Chinese, and they're one of them. His mom is this tiger mom, and says you go to Navy, and she's the one that was the courier of all the information, sending it back to the People's Republic,
I'm
right?
shocked. I am
Yeah,
shocked.
I know, and it's like, who
Yeah,
would have
these.
thought that like foreign people that don't have any affinity, like, oh, they swore an oath to the Constitution, that's gonna work, like, it's stuff like this is a total repudiation of civic nationalism,
Yeah,
right? Oh, they believe in the American creed, they passed a
yeah.
citizenship test and they're able to tell how many senators we have, citizen, and it's
A
like
lot of these
insane.
liberals, they have no conception of like national loyalty. They have zero. They can only think in terms of like this propositional nation, economic zone, individual destiny type thinking, and they're just completely shocked when people have this slightly older, it's not even older, it's just not American view of
Yeah,
their commitment to who they are, their people. Like people just have they can't even comprehend that. It's a
yeah,
complete slap in the face to the entire like mainstream conservative movement, which is completely ignorant of how people, human beings, are actually loyal to something other than the ability for malls to expand in American
yeah.
suburbia.
Yeah, I mean that's why. I mean, you look at. I mean, you going back to World War II. You look at Japanese internment, and it's looked at as this great horror and this great black stain on American history. And really, what it is is the old way of thinking of people realizing we don't know where the loyalty of these people lie.
Yeah.
That was the whole point. And because there was a ton of this going on, like the people don't know about how after Pearl Harbor, one of the Japanese pilots crash landed on a Hawaiian island, and you know, legal residents of America who were Japanese broke him out of prison and tried to get him to tried to help him escape to Japan. And that's one of the things that provoked the internment. Is we don't know where the loyalty of these people. Like people have real ethnic loyalty to their homelands, and we don't know how if we can trust them or not. And we're in the middle of a war with that country. So it looks it's horrible. Some of them are American citizens and were born here, and so on and so forth. It's like it didn't matter to Americans at the time, right? They understood reality, and they wanted to win a war against an enemy, and that you can't allow it. You can't do that. You couldn't we couldn't fight a war against China or any other country today because we don't have we don't have a country where people have this deep loyalty to America anymore. I mean, the majority of the military still is from like the South and the Midwest, and they go in because they love America and so forth. But that's being chipped away too, right? You especially from the top down, all of the top officers, all the generals are totally on board with the regime, and they're replacing the officer corps in the same way. I mean, you look at someone posted like West Point and all of the cadets at West Point and what they're like. And it's not it doesn't look like the military that previously existed. It looks like a DEI military. And there's a reason for that. They want that. They want people to be they want their soldiers to be loyal to the regime and led by people that are loyal to the regime and not to America. And so that's really the conflict, just politically, between Trump and Biden. It isn't even Trump. Like people think there's this. I mean, there certainly is. There are some boomers who are just like Trump is this divine figure. That's true. They're people that act that way with anything. But the majority of his support is because it's people that love our country, that love what America was, and wanted to return to that. And that's how these conflicts play out. Is you have traditional heritage Americans who love their country fighting against the revolution. That's what the political conflict is. It's not it's not Democrats or Republicans or anything like that. It's along these lines. So yeah, I mean, what do you want to say there? Here I'm offering this defense of an apologetic for Japanese internment. It's probably going to be that's where they're going to come after us next, I'm sure.
No, I think this is one of the things that they can't comprehend. Like even people
No,
like in Big Eva, they can't comprehend why there's this like resurgence of more of like a hard right, like a nationalist right wing, because they literally it's not part of their like paradigm that individuals could have the audacity to think of themselves as committed to their people.
yeah,
This is just completely foreign to them. In fact,
they
when
can't conceptualize it. No,
they can't conceptualize it, but also to the extent that they can, they also contextualize it within the bad column. They have the good column and the bad column, and
yeah,
people that you see that identify themselves as something beyond just this propositional nationhood, they automatically categorize them as the enemy. This is
yeah,
literally this is what in fact this is what Paul Gottfried's book Anti-Fascism is about. This sort of the animating paradigm of the post-war world order is there's propositional nationalists not nationalists, but propositional individuals that exist. Their community is built around the fact that they agree and assent to certain propositions about freedom and individual liberty and all that. And then there's the old world. The old world is you're committed to your people, and there's a certain ethnos about that connection with other people, and that you have deeper connections because you have a shared memory and a shared way of life and a shared way of doing these things, a shared priority list. And that is by definition the political evil in our world. And so this collapse of the propositional nation is really they can't understand what's happening. And so I would say double down. Think about
Yeah.
who you are. Who are
Yeah.
you beyond just the things that you learned in elementary school during the brainwashing period of the
Yeah.
new American order?
Yeah. I tell people, like, the more you hate the regime, the more you learn how evil it is.
Mm-hmm.
The more you have to love all of the good things about your country and about America.
Yeah.
And the more you have to focus on what our people accomplished here,
Mm-hmm.
what the heights that we reached. I mean, and not in this, like, boomer Sean Hannity way where America is the greatest country in the world, blah blah blah. Not in that sense, but in the sense that the things that happened here, the things that our ancestors did and built and created were
Mm-hmm.
truly great. This was a great nation that
Mm-hmm.
we built, that our people built, and that and so seeing that, I mean, just I've my kids in homeschooling, they've been reading Little House on the Prairie and
Mm-hmm.
things like that, and I've been watching with my kids all of these old westerns, all, like, we went through, I think, the entire John Wayne filmography, and they love it. They love it. I want them to think about the Old West and how America was settled, how there was
Yeah.
this vast continent-wide frontier that people just went up, loaded up a wagon, and went to nothing and
Mm-hmm.
built it into something, right? Where I am in the Midwest, in these small little towns, these were built by people who had nothing, and they turned it into the most productive farmland on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
Through, and it was all where I am. In Ingalls Wilder writes about the big woods, like, everywhere I was. This was all trees,
Yeah.
and now it's farmland, and those trees had to be cut down by men's sweat and people working extremely hard. I think about how frigid it is here in the winter, and these people are living in sod houses,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's brutal conditions that they suffered through,
Mm-hmm.
right? That it's remarkable what they accomplished and what they did, where you are, where they settled California. They, miners that came there, and during the gold rush, and all of the farmers that came to the really bountiful land in California. These are people of that are inspirational, that
Mm-hmm.
are, you see what they did, what they accomplished. I mean, reading about early New England, and the men and women that settled New England, and the brutal conflict that occurred there between them and the American Indians,
Mm-hmm.
like Prince Philip's War. Like, you read about these things, and the warfare that occurred, and how savage their enemies were, and how bloody it was, is and what they did to to defend their people, to defend the land that they were taking and conquering and settling is, I mean, it's absolutely remarkable. And so, like, thinking about those things, right? Thinking about that. I mean, even if you think about, like, the American Civil War, right? I used to have and you probably still do, the like Thomas DiLorenzo take on Lincoln and things like that. I'm probably a lot more balanced about it than I was. I still think, there's an example of, I mean, we could do a whole show on it, of the state of emergency, that there is an example within the American constitutional order, as
Mm-hmm.
it happened, as it actually played out, of a state of emergency occurring and taking extra constitutional action to, from their point of view, preserve the American Republic. And so, and of course, people, our friends in the South, hearing this, are like, what? But because it, doesn't play out that way. But I mean, from that perspective, that's what they were doing. And it was revolutionary action that occurred. I mean, Lincoln is this Caesar type figure. Maybe not in a positive sense, maybe, I don't know, but that's what he was. He was an American Caesar that took power, and fought this massive war to keep the South within America, within the United States. And it wasn't, we read history as though it's inevitable that they would win, but it absolutely wasn't.
No.
They almost lost several times.
Mhm.
I mean, if Gettysburg goes differently, the war ends, right? So like, I look at it that way. Like, we have example, because I see this, I saw this, just yesterday. There was really stupid tweet by Michael O'Fallon talking. Did you see it?
Maybe.
Yeah, where he's just like talking about, maybe he's going at like Josh Abatoy, a friend of the show, and guys like that, and Stephen Wolf, also a friend of the show, saying, that we don't need a Caesar or a Franco or whatever else. We need to respect the Constitution and love liberty and blah blah blah. And it's like, who's going to make them respect the Constitution, Mike?
Yeah.
Like, who's going to make them do it? Because that has been the conservative MO for the last 50 years. Just appeal to the Constitution and that'll work. It's like, they're trying to put the president of the United States in prison right now.
I know.
And you just, we need to respect the Constitution harder.
I say this again and again, but like, nothing makes the left happier than a conservative movement who wants to go back to the Constitution, because you can distract them and pigeonhole them, and you can keep them in the state of like self-enforced limitation, while the left, which doesn't care about the Constitution
at all,
can just do whatever they want. And the conservatives are like, well, we're not allowed to push back because the Constitution prevents us from doing so. And the left is like, that's right, the Constitution prevents you from fighting back.
That's right.
It's like, this is the enemy's playbook. The enemy wants the conservatives to abide by the constitutional limitations, while the left says, we actually don't care about the Constitution. You know what I mean? Like, that's not politics. That's surrender. That's what that is.
So, I mean, we need to look at the playbook of, honestly, actually, like, of the contemporary American conservative movement. Their great heroes are Washington and Lincoln, right? I mean, not paleocons. Lincoln's not a hero to them, usually. But I mean, you look at these men, and they're Caesar-like. Washington leads essentially a coup d'état against the British government in America, and he's taking extra constitutional action.
Did you see my tweet on George Washington?
No, I didn't. Maybe I did.
I tweeted last night. It's doing well. I said mainstream conservatives pretend like they would have been George Washington's top guy, but they were, but they refused to steal an election in the face of a left that is 1,000,000 times worse than the English monarchy, because that would be against the law.
Yeah, exactly. They're not like George Washington.
No.
At all, in any sense, because this
guy, people don't get that. Like, mainstream conservatives need to get this. What George Washington did was highly illegal.
Yes.
Very illegal.
If they had lost the war and they would have hanged, captured, he would have been hung.
Yep.
Do you not get that? Like, those were the stakes of the war, and if you're not willing to engage in that, I mean, say what you will about Trump, but he had to know at some level they would be doing all of this stuff if he lost.
We're gonna do a live retweet. So I just sent this to you. So you're gonna retweet this right now while we're on air.
Maybe I did see it.
I don't know. I don't care.
All right.
I think we have another minute.
Yeah. Then we got to go. Yeah. Here we go. I'm trying to help CJ get the Elon bucks. Yeah. I'm not quite there either. But yeah. That's the thing about all of this is, what we need are Washingtons and, dare I say it, Lincolns, to lead us. And a point there is that it can't be like, it won't play out in the way, Washington necessarily did. I mean, in one sense, Washington did have a legitimate authority, right? The Constitutional Congress had some kind of authority. The colonies sent delegates and so forth. Like there still is a legitimate political structure. It wasn't just some guy leaving his plantation and deciding to raise an army, right? But it was tenuous. It was still outside the bounds of the dominant power structure. And so for this to play out, how do you get to a new Washington, right? Or Joshua Abbatoy's Protestant Franco? It has to be through legitimate political means. And it might be electing a state governor who is like this, who is like DeSantis, but way better. And he's really good. I mean, he just fired this prosecutor. Like, that's the other thing. Is like, they're like, oh, that's unconstitutional. You can't do that. Like, these people are like, oh, respect the Constitution. And then, DeSantis fires this prosecutor who's just a raging communist. And are they freaking out about that? Some of them are. But nevertheless, like, you need a governor who will just tell the federal government, no, you're not going to do that. Send troops if you want.
Yeah.
And calling their bluff.
Yeah,
right?
Well, what it means when we call for a Protestant Franco, what it means is it doesn't mean to actually do exactly what Franco did, because America is not Spain. What it means is to find someone who is a decision maker and who recognizes when there's a state of emergency and that you need to suspend your relationship to the Constitution in order to save the well-being of your people.
Yeah,
that's what we mean by it.
Yeah, and the point is to return to a constitutional order. That's the entire point of it.
Yeah, it's which is something earned.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The Constitution isn't this magical document that hangs in the ether that everyone is bound to. Law only can ever be valid if it's enforced, and it's not enforced. Not broadly, only against us.
Only against us, exactly.
And so you have to make them. You have to have a guy that makes them do this, and you might have to go outside the Constitution in order to get to the point where you can make them. That's what you have to understand. It isn't like, oh, we got to preserve the Constitution and these guys just want to rule over people. That's the other. Like, he tweeted that today.
They don't
They want to. These Christian nationalists just want to rule over people, and it's like, no.
People.
I want crime to not be legal anymore.
Yeah,
I guess if that's what that means. I don't want 1 million babies getting murdered every year. If that's what that means, I guess we're going to control women. They can't murder their babies anymore. Okay. That's
like I always say,
Franco does.
Like I always say, like I'm totally cool with women, making their own, decisions as long as they're the right ones.
That's right. Yeah. Well, it's, but that's just the thing. It's like, the wrong one is murdering your child, right? That's the wrong one. We can't allow that. We cannot allow that to happen. So all of this stuff is like control people. What do you think government is? What do you think political power is? It's controlling people. No matter what you do, you're controlling people with law. That's what law does. Wait, how stupid are you that you don't get what law is? Right? That's what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, how do these people get that to this point that they think these things? It's so bizarre. It's so stupid and foolhardy. And people buy into it. That's the thing. Like, you have total anarcho tyranny in all of these major cities, and you want to, we need to enforce the Constitution somehow, right? Get out of here. Come on. But that's all I have to say about that. Do you have anything else to add?
Nope. I'm done. I'm
all right.
I'm good to go.
Well, there's plenty of other topics we didn't have time for today that we'll just have to save for.
Well, usually on Fridays, right after we're done recording, something big happens. So
so there'll be big news tomorrow.
Big news.
Big news. That's all the time that we have for today. Unfortunately, we're all gonna make it. No time for him. He survived the scaffold. So he's still with us, but he is not gonna make it again today. Maybe when we get enough subscribers to be able to go live, maybe he will. I don't know. But that's all the time I have for today. I have a few articles that are coming out on news.gab.com that you can check out. I have one that I just did on legislating morality, things that we talked about today. I just stole all of CJ's points to write that article.
Someone's gonna do it.
Yeah. What have you got going on with Chronicles that you want before we sign off here?
Nothing.
Nothing yet.
Nothing. No, there was a I'm supposed to do a book review. I did a conversation with him on Thomas Hobbes, which was actually really good. If you haven't listened to that, I would recommend doing so. Paul Gottfried is a big Thomas Hobbes guy, but Hobbes has some, and he's not perfect, but he does have some contributions that really play into the issue of whether the law is supreme or whether the political figure, the sovereign, is supreme. And this is one of the things that we've talked about today: is somebody has to be outside the law to enforce it. And this is what we talked about to basically today, and this is what a lot of people have to come to terms with when they see the Constitution being, forced on you as something that is going to restrain you while your enemies don't adhere to it. And Thomas Hobbes has a lot of, contributions on that. So the most recent conversation with Paul Gottfried on Chronicles Magazine is worth a listen to. And also, I had Charles Haywood on, and he's been, the object of a lot of derision recently. But we talked about Patrick Deneen's new book. So, yeah, he did like a little review for Chronicles too. So those are good things, not to distract from Contra Mundum podcast, but that's what I've been doing over there. So,
no, absolutely. I'm happy to promote Chronicles in any way I can, because the work you guys are doing is magnificent. So yeah, that's really all we got for us here today. Thank you all so much for listening. Please comment. I love the comments. We're getting lots and lots of comments, most of them positive. Even the negative ones we love. This is a debate show. We like to debate, even though CJ and I mostly agree. We like to argue about stuff. And so, if you have comments, please have it. But yeah, like, subscribe, share this with people. We're very happy that the podcast is people are listening, and it's starting to take off. And so, yeah, please continue engaging and interacting. We love it. And yeah, that's all we have. So have a wonderful week, and we will see you next time.